There's an appeal to younger conservatives who want to be contrarian, who want to feel like they're a rebel or whatever, and they're getting drawn down the Charlie Kirk pipeline, not the Charlie Cook pipeline.
Ooh, that was a good line. That was a really good line.
I just pulled it off right off the top of my head. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and I'm delighted to be here with my fellow at the University of Southern California, Jane Coaston, contributing opinion writer to the New York Times and on-air contributor to CNN. Jane, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me, Tim.
Thanks for doing this. You're on a Lenten Twitter hiatus. Tell me about that.
I take a break every year from Twitter because Twitter, I feel like it constricts your mind in such a way. I used to tell someone that the trick to Twitter is to only tweet 10% of the things you think you want to tweet. And it's even better if you just don't say anything at all for a long period of time. You know how many times there's a thing on Twitter and then you try to explain it to someone who's not on Twitter and you're like, this is just stupid. It's nice to not do that. It's nice to not have a what is happening? Who is this person? Why are we all yelling at this one person? Because especially now that Twitter has been gamified to such an extent, so much of it is you have a blue checkmark verification and all you're just saying is stuff to drive engagement so people yell at you and you make money. And I'm I'm not going to help you make money. No,
so
I will
then why
not.
are you going back? Why are you going back?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think it's because
I'm asking for me, really.
I am
an addict.
Yeah, I have a problem. I'm also on Blue Sky. 3/4 of the conversations on Blue Sky are did you see what happened on Twitter? Oh my God. Did you see this fucking guy? This fucking guy said this fucking thing. And you're we all transferred out of a high school, but we can't stop talking about that high school. So
can I just say, though, this makes sense. This is something I've not tried Blue Sky, but this is something that's frustrating about Threads. The addictive part of Twitter is the fighting, the winning, and the owning, right? And so if you go to a space where you're not fighting, winning, and that's what everybody says they want, they're like, oh, what I really would like is a community where everybody agrees with me and we can talk in good faith, be good-natured about things. And it's it turns out that is very boring. Without the foes, what is the point?
Well, it's interesting because Blue Sky is a place in which you have different foes. Blue Sky is where all the tankies are. So you wind up having arguments with hardcore tanky leftists, and you end up coming out you sound like a neocon. But it's just because you are a person who thinks that maybe Stalin had some downsides. And it's a fascinating place because it's political ideologies that you're I didn't even know they made those. It's just you're a Peruvian Maoist? You're a who? I have to go back and try to remember post 1945 political ideological formations to just be who are you? I will say that what you were saying about how people, oh, I don't want drama, I don't want to fight or something like that. Yes, they do. And the people who say that want it the most, it's how during this time, I've decided apparently to watch all of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which is amazing television in every way. But as with any reality franchise, the person who says, I don't want drama, wants drama. They want the most drama. They want to fight. They want to fight all the time. And because if you don't want to fight generally, you don't have to say that. You don't need to clarify that you do not want to have an argument. You just simply don't have an argument. But yeah, so the 40 days is good. It's funny though, because the first time I did this was in 2020. So I came back and it was oh, global pandemic.
Well, there hasn't been a global pandemic while you've been gone, but I regret to inform you that much of this podcast will be us talking about what people are doing on the internet.
I care deeply about it. I'm fascinated by it. I'm convinced it matters in a way that I haven't yet been able to truly articulate because I wrote a piece in 2020, which I think still holds up, that Donald Trump was too online. Yeah. And we saw this again with Ron DeSantis. There's a degree of being so online that you only refer to things that happen online and you think everyone knows what you're talking about, that's bad. But there is a lot you can learn from how people perform their politics or their culture online. And then they try to take it to normal people. And many times they sound insane, but it's still interesting and worth talking about.
Well, this transitions nicely into one of the clips that I wanted to play for you. When it comes to what is happening on the online right, I have become kind of fascinated with Charlie Kirk's podcast that airs once a week called Thought Crime, where it's just a bunch of bros, just a bunch of white guys talking about some of their thoughts that maybe shouldn't be said out loud, and yet they're going to say it out loud every week. And if you just bear with me, because I do think that that we both agree on this, that it's easy and right to laugh and make fun of them about this, but also it's disturbingly influential and pernicious. So, Aaron, if you don't mind, everybody just bear with us for a highlight reel of some of my recent favorites from Charlie Kirk.
You could have brought to you by Coca-Cola. And no, I'm not kidding. By the way, I would totally tune in to see some pedo get their head chopped off. Convicted by a jury.
By the way,
peers.
that's going to get.
No, I'm talking about a real thing. I'm not talking
all
about
executions in Belarus are by firearm. That's not a choice or anything.
Andrew's saying don't make kids watch it, and I think the absolute
I think
opposite.
At a certain age, it's an initiation.
16,
if
you can drive, you can watch.
No, but hold on.
Not even 16.
If
I would
all of a
say,
sudden you look at some of these savages, like in Indiana, there was this guy that went in and killed a pregnant woman and her 3 kids. Yeah. And you know what? I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. You think children should have, you should see it? What is the age? At what age should you start to see public executions?
16. I think you could do it earlier. I think maybe at age 12,
whenever,
like 6th grade or so.
We see this where mass shooters across the country who are trans, law enforcement is more interested in using the proper pronouns than actually finding justice or saying, this despicable person doesn't deserve our attention. Who cares what their pronouns? You know what the pronouns are? Savage animal. That's the pronouns. And has Joel Osteen come out and said that the wicked trans ideology is to blame for this?
No, he has not. I have not seen him come out and say anything other than it's unfortunate what happened.
Over-under. How long until Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are no more? Over-under, Blake.
Like until they're dead? I could see their suicide pact taking effect.
No, not that one.
It.
Not when the mRNA gene-altering shot makes Travis Kelce drop in the middle of practice.
That one's way more fun.
I'm talking about when will they no longer be together?
I don't think they're together now. I think this is all a psyop.
What's the goal of the psyop?
World totally agree with Blake.
You agree, Jake?
Totally agree
Jack?
with
That just to make money?
She's nasty. She's ugly. Nobody likes her. Nobody likes her. She looks like a teenage boy. Like dudes don't like her. Like if you put her in front of she's ugly.
That's true. Yeah. Does Taylor Swift have any eggs left?
I don't think she probably. I don't know if she had it to start with.
So to recap,
Riveting wisdom.
Yeah, to recap, children should watch executions. Taylor Swift, I guess, doesn't have any eggs. Is too old. Travis Kelce's Super Bowl champion is gonna die from the fake vaccine. What do we? I had to cut out the clip about how we talked too much about Martin Luther King Day and the Civil Rights Act. Just a lot of wisdom there. Just kind of rate your level of disturbance versus desire to give a wedgie after listening to that.
I think it's extremely important to make fun of giant bad dorks. I think it's very important. I refuse to respond to, say, neo-Nazis marching in Nashville by being afraid of them. These are America's biggest dorks, and they should be mocked. Imagine hanging on to an ideology that was supposed to last 1,000 years and lasted for 12. Come on. It couldn't even make it into a PG-13 movie. I'm not going to be afraid of these people. I refuse. And it's also indicative of the fact that Charlie Kirk has probably never really had an actual group of friends, because all of their conversations seem like they're trying to have normal bro time, but it's a normal bro time if you told an alien what dudes talk about. And then he was like, all right, I'll interpret it. But it is concerning to me because I think that it is a fascinating example of audience capture. A couple of years ago, Charlie Kirk, he was doing a college tour with Turning Point USA. He and I think it was also Donald Trump Jr. was with him, and also Dan Crenshaw, Representative Dan Crenshaw. And they were getting just berated by this Groyper movement. Groypers are white nationalist followers of Nick Fuentes, one of America's great dorks, racist, awful person. Anyway, so every event, these people would show up and start screaming like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories at Charlie Kirk and at Crenshaw and Donald Trump Jr. It was a giant issue for TPUSA. And you've seen over the last couple of years that Charlie Kirk has basically decided, like, you know what? I think they were right. They're talking about Israelis celebrating after 9/11. Those people, good points. Good points. And so I think it's a really good example of segmented audience capture. Like, this doesn't sell. Like, there are not millions of Americans who are like, you know what? I want to hear more about how Martin Luther King is a bad person. Like, that's just not a thing people want. But it is something that a segment of this audience wants so much that they overwhelm anyone else. And you've seen that with TPUSA. They've had to disband their ambassadors program because their ambassadors kept being like, I think Jews hate Jesus. Like they kept just going wilding out on the internet because, I mean, I'm sure that they actually hold these views, but also because the way audience capture works, and I keep using that term because I think it's so interesting. There's a great Substack on the subject, which is basically that, like, once you have an audience, you don't have them, they have you. And if you say you're a content creator on YouTube, if you are like, all I want to do is cook sometimes, you will wind up like cooking 20 meals a day and doing all these videos about how you cook 20 times a day or something like that. Like, the audience will drive you deeper into whatever it is that you're doing. And so if your audience wants to see, they want to see more and they want to see bigger versions of whatever content you create. And I think that what has happened to Charlie Kirk is that the audience that he has now is simultaneously people who hate him and people who desperately want and will continue to demand more fringe, red pill, racist content. They want to hear about how Taylor Swift is too ugly to live. And they want to hear about how you would not want to get on a plane with a black pilot. Like, they want to hear this. And so the more that everyday people, everyday conservatives even, are pushed away from this type of content, the more the people who really like it are like, yes, give me more of that. I will reshare it and retweet it. And it's, I don't know, it's sad in a way. It's not like, oh, I wish Charlie Kirk could do better. Because I'm like, I don't know if there is a better, but it is sad to me to see that the content has been driven into this awful well.
Do better, Charlie Kirk. I guess, and I really should have included the I'm Scared of Black Pilots Now that was a thought crime classic from Charlie Kirk. I want to push back a little bit on one element, though. I do think some of this is audience capture, but I also think that there is audience molding that's happening from the top down. And I base that on having gone now for many years to various TPUSA events.
Oh yeah, I'm banned.
The crowd, yeah. Like,
I'm banned
and my
from
favorite
TPUSA
question.
events.
Oh well, luckily they maybe after this podcast I'll be banned too. But luckily they still welcome me. And the same question I always ask every kid, the first one I see, is why are you here? What animates you? Besides, potentially getting to have some kissy time with somebody else, with a MAGA girl or boy, depending on the proclivities. And the answers have gotten weirder every year. I do have to say, they are and so I do think that there's some, they're being molded by this stuff. They're being radicalized to a certain extent. And it is true that even though this group is a subsect of a subset, they are the subset that's going to go work for congressman, run for state legislature, go if God forbid Donald Trump wins again, like some of these people are going to be in the Trump administration. And so that, to me, that is the part that makes it like a little bit more dangerous than just simply audience capture. And like when you say things like, oh, these guys are so weird, it's not popular and they're turning people off. It's like, yeah, that's true. But they might still be popular enough to get elected in certain places and to be staffers in certain places. And that's pretty alarming.
I think that both can be true. Like, yes, they are very very disconnected from what normal people do. Like, I had a conversation with someone, Charles C.W. Cook, who writes for National Review, talking about the like MAGA conspiracy theories around the Super Bowl. And he talked about how these people have a totalitarian mindset, not like Stalinist, but the idea that everything should have to be about politics. Like, you cannot talk about anything, any movie, any sporting event. You don't go to sporting events because, unless you can make it into a political activity. I think it's particularly telling also that so much of this has been aimed at people who are at activities and people who are generally popular. They are also turned off by normal people, talking about how cool they are for the fact that they don't listen to mainstream music. They don't watch mainstream television. They don't watch sports. Like, they're basically hipsters, but way worse.
White nationalist hipsters.
Yeah. When I was hipster in college, I just listened to a lot of LCD Sound System. Like, these people just suck. And so I do think, like, simultaneously, I think that audience capture plays such a big part of this. I also think that audience, like, there's this symbiotic relationship of telling your audience that all of your weirdest shit is cool and awesome. And then your audience is like, we want weirder shit. And you just keep going back and forth forever into a world in which, if we go full Groyper, you start talking about how the gayest thing you can do is for a man to have sex with a woman. Like, you start being so intentionally off-putting and then telling yourself that you're off-putting because you're so brave and interesting. No, you're just off-putting. No one likes it. It will seep into our political culture, but no one's going to enjoy that.
Yeah, but sometimes it makes you feel good. Yeah, I agree. It was a lot less pernicious for us hipsters, mentioning the fact that we liked, name-checking bands that they haven't heard of, like, The Heat and Gil Scott-Heron and David Axelrod, the artist, not the political strategist. Like, that made us feel cool. Yeah. Okay, but it was also really annoying. And so this is my problem with the Charlie Cook thing, though, which you see in that interview, is that the position of the National Review crowd, the Republican egghead crowd, right, is that, like, these people that we're talking about, the Cernoviches and the Charlie Kirks and people that are out there being like, we can't even watch football anymore, and like it's gone too woke, and I don't like Disney, I don't show my kids Disney, and we're only going to watch Ben Shapiro movies now. Like the egghead Republican class said, like, when they talk about it, like he is in that interview with you. Yeah. They're acting like those guys are the weird minority fringe people and like I'm the mainstream. And it's like, no, egghead Republican conservatives are an even tinier group, and they're shrinking. And like and as annoying as those other people are, there is an appeal to younger conservatives who want to be contrarian, who want to feel like they're a rebel or whatever. And they're getting drawn down the Charlie Kirk pipeline, not the Charlie Cook pipeline.
Right. Ooh, that was a good line. That was a really good line.
I just pulled it off right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because there have been intra-conservative battles for pretty much the entire history of conservatism. And so, like, the battle of, like, who is the mainstream conservative, I think really gets in the way of thinking about, like, what does conservatism mean to any of these people? Like, Charlie Kirk, he might describe himself as a conservative, but he's a Republican, but he's not a conservative. But we get into these like definitional battles of what any of this means. But I think at least the new generation, the TPUSA people, have figured out, oh, wait, no one cares. Nobody cares about the three-legged stool and tax policy and limited government and liberty. No one cares about that. They just, like, what they want to hear is culture war and celebrity culture conversations and talking about how terrible this new thing is and how much better it would be if something else happened. They figured out that this sells better and they're going to keep doing it and people will keep responding to it. And there's no off ramp.
As much as nobody cares about just like the definitional fights about the word conservative and, you know, the details of that, even fewer people care about that with regards to libertarianism. But we are going to cover that topic at the end of this podcast. But before, we have to do a little bit of news stuff on the internecine fights. You interviewed Don Bacon a little while ago now, but we have this fight going on in the House. And there was one thing that struck me from his interview with you, which was he still identifies in these internecine conservative fights as, well, you know, we've got some national security conservatives and we've got some social conservatives and we've got some moderate conservatives. Then we also have this other group over here called the Populists, and some of them have gotten in as well. And he's like, we're all fighting it out and we're all kind of working through it all. This is a paraphrase of how he described the House conference to you. And like, that is not right. Like, the House conference is entirely run by the populists that he was trying to act like are kind of a fringe group, and then everyone else just decides to what extent that they want to go along with them is essentially how I see it. But I'm curious how you assess kind of the power dynamics in the internal fights in the House, particularly with the upcoming, you know, kind of Ukraine fight,
right?
That is going to Ukraine and border fight is going to be happening.
Well, it's fascinating because the House GOP is in this funny position where everyone hates them, and yet they have no reason to stop doing the thing that everybody hates. People are furious at them all the time. And it's been fascinating to see how the fury aimed at them from wide swaths of movement conservatism is in no way moving them past the things that are making everybody else so mad, especially because Trump is fine with it. Trump's fine with it, right. So like, whatever. And it's been funny seeing people being like, oh, for Speaker McCarthy. Well, like, Speaker McCarthy is off, like, I don't know, telling people weird things about Nancy Mace. Like, it is.
And Matt Gaetz.
Yeah.
Kevin McCarthy is talking a lot about Matt Gaetz and Nancy Mace's sex life in his retirement.
That's the worst sentence I've heard in a really long time. 2, there is something that happens to Republicans once they either are like kicked out of speakership or retire or something, where they just suddenly are like the chattiest bitches in the history of time. Like, these are just the messiest bitches. They want to go in the confessional and they've got a lot to say. And if you're John Boehner, you live your best life just drinking red wine in somebody's backyard while selling marijuana adjacent products through some other means. But I do think, though, that the business of the House has been ignored for the new business of the House, which is generating media content and creating personalities. I've long argued that culture war is perfect for certain politicians because culture wars don't have an end. Like, there is no way, you can't guarantee an end to a culture war. It's an ongoing issue that you could always fundraise off of. And you can talk about in such big strokes that it's unsolvable. Like, if you think America has turned away from God, there is not like a policy prescription to get America back into God. You've seen the House GOP basically become like, they treat every issue like that. They treat every single issue as if it is a giant unsolvable morass that they just simply will not deal with. You could say that this, this funding really matters to us, we will get it passed. You could do that. Or you could not do anything and yell a lot, which, I understand. I also enjoy not doing anything and yelling a lot. But, I'm not a representative member of Congress.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was listening to I read your Bacon interview, and then I was listening earlier to an interview Dan Crenshaw was doing with Jamie Weinstein. And those are guys that if they had their druthers would do something, right? They would like to do something if they had their druthers. And yet they're unable to do anything. But they also seem unable to be able to correctly identify the cause of why they can't do anything, and that being Donald Trump and the majority or strong plurality of Donald Trump acolyte cultists in their conference. Because if they did that, then they would be cast out. And so they end up in this like place of permanent ennui and frustration, right? Where it's like, I want to do something, I can't really do anything. But I can't address why I can't do anything. So in these interviews where they, sometimes say sensible things, they also end up having to not, they can't really explain. Like they have to be like, well, there's Joe Biden, it's like smoke and mirrors. Like, well, there's Joe Biden and the Democrats are also, and they've gone, and then the squad is also, and, and Congress and DC and, and here we are.
Right. No, it's interesting because it's gotten to the point now where I'm like, why are you here? Like, what is the point? I'm sure that
when Mike Gallagher said to you this week, you're right, I'm gone.
I think it is a very bad sign that basically every Republican who is like, I would like to complete a task. It's like, oh, this isn't a task completing place. This is a task ignoring place. That is very telling that there are so many people who don't want to deal with this anymore. But I would argue that I have long said that if you want to be in Congress or if you want to be president, that's a sign that you shouldn't be. Like, we should just randomly assign people to serve in Congress or as president. Just be like, oh, shit, it's your day. Sorry. And, I've spoken with Representative Crenshaw before, and some of these people, they are so hamstrung by their purported allies. Like, they have infinitely better relationships with Democrats, like centrist Democrats that they need to pretend that they hate and believe are like assassins of Satan. They have so much better relationships with Democrats than they do with like House Freedom Caucus people. And they need to sometimes pretend otherwise. It is fascinating to watch Republicans get into Congress and realize that the problem with the Republican Party is Republicans.
Crenshaw's answer to all of this, like the context around all this is why the Ukraine thing can't get passed, right? The Ukraine reports can't get passed. And Crenshaw's like, well, Tucker, I wouldn't even call Tucker a Republican. Like the stuff that Tucker is doing is just, he's totally a populist demagogue. And Jamie Weinstein, like, replies to me, he's like, Tucker is on the VP shortlist. And I'm like screaming into my car radio. I wanted Jamie to be like, and also mention that you, Dan Crenshaw, have no chance to be on the VP shortlist. Because like, shouldn't that tell you something, right? Yeah. Like, maybe Tucker is not a classically liberal Reagan Republican, but a party is what it is currently constituted
it's not,
as.
Yeah,
and
it's not what you want it to be. Like, it's not dreams and wishes. This is what it actually is. And there are more people who are more interested in the Tucker Carlson-esque embrace of a very specific form of populism, which this is going to make me sound like a pretentious asshole, but when I think about populism, like in the history of American populism, there's like the populist movement of the early 20th century and talking about William Jennings Bryan and farmers. And this populism seems to be so reliant on a populi that I live in Utah. I know people. Yeah. I'm with the people. And the populism as represented by Tucker Carlson and some folks seems so untethered to the populace that I live around. Yeah.
Like, why is the Little Mermaid having to be white a populist?
Yeah, I don't see
the connection.
When I talk to people in line at, Sprouts or something like that, people are not saying that our big issue is that there's like a background lesbian kiss in the Buzz Lightyear movie. Like, come on. Like, it's fascinating to watch a populism that seems completely unwilling. Like, there's an invented populism that I see some writers talking about, how like Trump really stands for the working class. But then you see Trump and he's like, I got sneakers and I'm really mad about this depiction of me in some meme. And it's fascinating to watch how so many writers are so focused on this idea of populism among Republicans. Like this idea that they want to expand the social safety net or talk about unions. And then you get actual Republicans who are like, actually, I don't want to do any of those things at all. And
Jane, I have to interrupt you there because you're so good at this already at the podcast transition that I need to let you know that when it comes to the populist sneakers, we just have a little bit of audio for you. You've been off Twitter, so I don't know. Do you know? Were you aware that the populist sneakers included?
I checked Mediaite, which is great because it's like, here's everything that you need to know if you want online bullshit news. And I'm like, thank you, Mediaite. You're here for me.
Well, for those who have missed it, there was an autograph version of the populist sneakers, and I want to hear from the winner.
So, what was your winning bid? $9. Then let's see the signature. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations. A $9,000 bid on the populist sneakers. Do you know, have you been able to see yet who the bidder was?
No, I have not.
New York Post finally comes through this afternoon. Roman Scharf, the founder and CEO of luxury watch dealer Luxury Bazaar, walked away with the never-ending, never surrender high tops. That watchmaker, that watch company, Russian. A Russian luxury watch CEO has won the winning bid. I mean, I think that pretty much encapsulates the state of play.
Yep. I will never forget how the 2020 campaign turned into a campaign about boat parades and the beautiful boaters. So yeah, this all checks out. This all checks out. And it's like, most Americans don't vote. And those Americans that do they think about politics in sort of like an adjacent way, unless it's local. Like, I live in Salt Lake City, where apparently, as far as I can tell, one of the big issues is that people are furious about gondolas. Oh my God, gondolas! Like, people, they want to put a gondola in Cottonwood Canyon, and people are very mad about it. And then people are mad at the people who are mad about it. And I'm just like, what is gondolas? It's all anyone wants to talk about. So, like, in general, people will be like local issues, and then like that might affect them. And then you see people who are just like, the thing that gets me about kind of culture war style populism is that it's issues that don't affect you and you don't live anywhere near. And yet you're like, America will fall because some Seattle school teacher decided to tell somebody about Angela Davis or something like that. Like, and it just is telling how disconnected that is, like that, from the beautiful boaters to $9,000 bids for ugly ass shoes. Like, it is telling how this movement that I believe were supposed to believe was a movement of like some sort of silent majority is just like, it's not a silent majority. It's the really loud people who own a bunch of car dealerships in Dayton.
Or a gray market luxury watch dealer. I do want to congratulate Roman. That is good. Okay, in more serious news, the culture war of absurdity occasionally intersects with the culture war of very serious limits on people's rights. And that happened also this week. Alabama Supreme Court ruled Friday that frozen embryos are people, and someone can be held liable for destroying them. Decision will imperil in vitro fertilization, IVF, and affect hundreds of thousands of patients who get treatments like it. Thoughts?
Well,
IVF? Do you think that? What do you?
I'll
go back to thoughts. Is my question.
I think back to how right after the Dobbs decision leaked, there seemed to be, and I would say, I do not know that there was an actual literal memo. I do know that there used to be a time at Salem Media, which ran a bunch of like right-wing radio shows, that they literally would have a memo go out every day being like, don't talk about this, you should talk about this. I do not think that there was a literal memo in this case, but there seemed to be this universal thing of like, actually, if we overturn Roe versus Wade, that's not that big a deal.
Right.
I heard, I had a conversation with Kevin Williamson about this, in which he was like, this is going to be, we're just going to have the abortion laws of France, which people have famously always said, the pro-life movement has always said, we want French abortion law. I remember that. That was a big deal. It was the March for French abortion laws. And I think it was Eric Erickson who said something like, no, people won't really notice. It's just not a big deal. People won't really notice any changes at all. And as I have said again and again and again, this is the biggest dog catching the car moment in, I think, American political history. and why I bring this up is that it was never just about abortion. It was always going to be about birth control. It was always going to be about IVF and reproductive assistance technologies. I grew up Catholic and spent a long time in high school trying to be an evangelical Christian ineffectively. And you read a lot about snowflake children, which are embryos that people adopt because every single embryo is a human life, every single one. And so you just adopt them and have them implanted, and you have rescued a snowflake child. And I heard how people talked about IVF.
That sounds nice, actually. Is something wrong with that? That sounds nice.
Well, great if you would like to do that, but it also indicates to me a general belief that, one, IVF is evil, because IVF requires that some embryos will not be implanted. At some point, IVF is a very challenging and long and expensive process. And I think that for lots and lots of people who have had it, it is a very emotionally challenging time as well, because you have to have discussions like which embryo will we implant and how will this work and what does this look like? And there has long been a strain of, specifically among social conservatives, about saying like all of this is evil and awful. And all of this is bad because at some point, if you believe that these embryos are equivalent to babies, that you basically have to murder a baby as a matter of course in order to go through IVF. And you see that with people fighting against birth control. The idea that birth control is a form of murder because it stops the fertilized egg from implanting in the uterus. That's not how any of this works. But if you spent a lot of time in anti-abortion, pro-life circles, you knew it wasn't just about abortion. It was about anything and everything that has to do with sex at all. And so it is interesting to me that right after Dobbs came out, you could see a bunch of people within social conservative circles seeing the writing on the wall that like, this thing we want so badly, we have not 100% told everyone what it would mean for millions of other people, even the people who are very opposed to abortion. The people who are opposed to abortion rights get IVF. People who
I have plenty of those people in my life.
Yeah, so have I. Lots of people have, and probably even more people who oppose abortion have also used birth control. And you're starting to see a narrative in certain conservative publications talking about how women are starting to reject birth control. And then I think it was Charles Lehman, who's at the Manhattan Institute, was like, no, they aren't. What are you talking about? Like pulling out stats. But like, you can see the narrative start building about like, enforcing the Comstock laws, about sending information about birth control via the mail. Like, you can see where this comes from. And so I always think back to how the leak of the Dobbs decision was talked about as being, a 5-alarm fire for liberals and reproductive justice advocates. But among conservatives, there generally was this idea of like, shh, don't talk about it.
Right.
You can see, based on Alabama, you can see that if you are thinking about this as Dobbs is just an abortion decision, it's not. It's also a decision about IVF. It's also about birth control. It's basically about anything having to do with people having sex with other people in a way that might result in the development of more people. And I think that it's really interesting to see how people are reacting to that. And I think it will always be deeply telling for me how among the first reactions to the end of Roe was people trying to tell other people that it'll be just like France.
The Alabama and France don't have a lot in common. Hostility to laws that are going to limit people's ability to do IVF is one good thing about being a libertarian. You were once a libertarian.
I was.
You left the Libertarian Party.
I did.
Right around the same time I left the Republican Party. I think I actually beat you to the punch. If we're looking at the timeline.
Oh, man, you Irish goodbye before I did.
Yeah, I think I got right under the wire on that Substack post. But I saw a quote from Penn Jillette, and I was like, I have to talk to Jane Coaston about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're my number one person to talk to, because Penn had been a prominent libertarian who'd go to Libertarian Party functions, and you'd see him doing libertarian speeches and stuff. And he said this in an interview recently. I've not used the word libertarian in describing myself since I got an email during lockdown when a person from a libertarian organization wrote to me and said, we're doing an anti-mask demonstration in Vegas, and obviously we'd like you to head it. Now, Penn, I looked at that email and I went, the fact that they sent me this email is something I need to be very ashamed of, and I need to change. Boy, I love that. I love anything that has self-reflection at that level. And so I was just wanting to hear kind of your reaction to that and your journey and how you assess kind of libertarian stuff these days.
Well, it's challenging because I think that many people, I would argue, are small L libertarians. Now, granted, because many people are small L libertarians for themselves and not for other people. Right. And we all do this. Like everybody has, I wrote about this years ago, that everybody has like, if I break laws, it's fine. If you break laws, you should be shot. Right. But I think that for me, libertarianism meant a civic libertarianism, a libertarianism that said that like the power of the state can and is often used for bad purposes. I think especially the more work I did thinking about restrictions to African Americans with regard to gun rights, thinking about the way that states and state power can be wielded against the least powerful. I think I still embrace a civic small L libertarianism. The problem for me with the Libertarian Party is, okay, it's manifold, but I'll stick to three things. One, they view, right now, they have been taken over by the Mises Caucus. And the Mises Caucus views popularity as a sign that they are doing something wrong. This was in response to, I think that there was some talk about RFK running as a libertarian, which would be hilarious because RFK is the least libertarian person to ever live, in many respects, for good and for ill. And the comment from, if I remember correctly, the comment from the Mises Caucus was, we would never do this. We would never let him use our name. When Gary Johnson ran, and Gary Johnson ran as a libertarian in 2016, I interviewed him twice. He told me that he was 50% Hillary Clinton and 50% Donald Trump, I believe. No, he was 50% Donald Trump and 50% Bernie Sanders. So everyone should love him. And I thought to myself, that's not how that works. But he got more votes than any libertarian candidate in history. And many libertarians viewed him as being a giant squish because he said things like, maybe you should use a driver's license. And like, there is a purity spiral that the Libertarian Party has been in for, I think, probably the past 7-8 years. And in a moment in which I think more people could have embraced civic libertarianism, especially after, not just after the summer of 2020 and the murder of, say, Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, but after Uvalde, after seeing a bunch of cops who literally were like, should we go in and stop this person killing children? Or should we stand here and do nothing and then punish the people who try to make us do things? We will choose the latter. And you actually saw a lot of people being like, I didn't know cops did this. Like, if this is this why people are so mad at the police? And like every civic, I'm sure Radley Balco somewhere was like, yeah. Right. But, and I think that was something, that was a moment in which the Libertarian Party could have, a version of the Libertarian Party that doesn't exist, could have really embraced that. Instead, the Libertarian Party has rejected the mainstream, kind of similar to our earlier conversation, and they've decided to double down on things like, basically that Putin and Biden are the same person, or that we should repeal every civil rights law, and we should make it illegal for LGBT people to be teachers. Lots of stuff about like repealing the 19th Amendment so that women don't vote. they responded to a moment in which more people were looking for libertarian ideas by saying, no, what we're going to give you is our racist views. And I think that that's something, I mean, that's the thing that struck me. And I think that my third point is like, this was a moment in which I didn't know enough about the thing, and yet I signed up, which is like almost every subscription service I have. And yet I did this for my political party. Like, I think that I had an idea that I was really I was not going to become a Republican. And I was really displeased by how Democrats were viewing the role of state power. Basically saying, give all of us all of the power, and being like, no, maybe none of you should be able to do any of this. And the Libertarian Party to me was like, this is an option for people. I read Reason. This was an option for people who were interesting and thoughtful and wanted to be kind of to make a statement about how there was another choice to be made. This idea within libertarianism has always, to me, and obviously I don't know everything clearly, but it seemed to be this battle between we could make civic life better for more people, or we could argue that it's okay to sell your own children and that actually we should let cops kill more people because those people just don't deserve to be alive. And it's like, what? And so I think that for me, I think that it goes to what Penn said, talking about how when, it's not about government enforcing mask policies. It's about having an anti-mask rally because you just hate masks. And I think that that was something where it's like, this has nothing to do with government enforcing anything. This has to do with we just don't like it. And becoming the party of we just don't like it, becoming the party of oppositional defiance disorder, we already have one of those. We don't need another one that's somehow weirder and worse.
Well, this is my final question. This is the thing that I meditate on this with regards to Republican stuff and a bunch of things in life. Is if there's no practical implication where something works, then maybe there's something fundamentally flawed about it.
Ah, yes.
You know what I mean? And I do wonder that about libertarianism, right? Because there's a lot of appealing things to me about libertarianism. Mm-hmm. I considered myself a libertarian-ish Republican at one point.
Yeah.
But the question is, if any time something is put into practice, it gets warped into this gross racist oppositional defiance disorder, group, then does that say something about the idea at its fundamental level, or can the idea still be pure, but it's the people who are bad?
Both. I think that there are ways in which libertarianism can influence policy in good ways. I think that, for instance, having a loosey-goosey approach to, say, housing zoning is great. Something I really like about Salt Lake City is that, as far as I can tell, if you would like to build housing in a place and you're it's not federal land or something like that, and you want to build a single family home or a multifamily domain, fine, go nuts. So you actually have, in my neighborhood, you have an apartment building next to a single family home, and people don't explode. People have not started committing murder in the streets or something like that. I do think there are ways in which libertarianism can influence policy for good, but I do think that wielding libertarianism itself and attempting to make that an all-encompassing ideology, I think is really a bad idea. I think that, you wind up in that kind of true libertarianism has never been tried kind of thing of
yes.
If it weren't for these, if only the little father knew about how great it would be if, I don't know, we all lived free and died harder or something. But I do think that libertarianism can be a helpful corrective. So many people do the, won't somebody take care of the kids, or someone should do something. Someone should do something about that impetus is generally bad. And I think libertarians are generally correct on that front when it's hey, that bill that says it's going to keep our children safe, it probably won't keep our children safe. It's probably bad. Any bill that's named about like rescue baby bunnies or keep our children safe from evil or something, it's probably bad.
Yeah.
Like there should probably be fewer laws, and how those laws are enforced should perhaps be more even and equal. But I think that has nothing. That's not libertarianism. That's like libertarian. Those are two different things to me. This is all to say that if a political party really appeals to you, you should probably not join it. You should probably, if something appeals to you directly, don't do it. Whatever it is. Like, it's sort of like how...
no need to be a joiner.
No, don't join things. It's sort of like how, like, if a religious group is, like, super interested in you, don't join it. Nope. Anyone who's interested in you, stay away.
I love an individualist ethos is a wonderful way to end this podcast. Jane, you are just a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having
we
me.
could probably do a full 2 hours on libertarianism sometime. So when you're just bored in Salt Lake and you're just like, hey, I want to just spend my afternoon just
look anytime.
You know where to find me.
Anytime, absolutely anytime. Thank you so much for having me.